Ever find yourself scrolling on your phone and suddenly realize an hour has gone by? Or you tell yourself you'll just have one cookie and then the whole box is gone? Well, you're not alone. Today, we're diving into the science of why it feels so hard to just stop, why our brains seem to be hijacked in a world that's practically designed to get us hooked. So, you might think a top psychiatrist specializing in addiction would be immune to all this, right? Well, our guide for this explainer, Dr. Anna Lembke, starts her book with a pretty surprising confession. She got hooked on romance novels. Not just reading them, but devouring them, staying up all night just to get to the end. She realized, with a shock, that she just wanted her fix. The very same language her patients used to describe their own struggles. And that's a really startling thought, isn't it? If an expert in the field can get trapped by something as seemingly innocent as books, what does that mean for the rest of us? In our world of endless Netflix queues, infinite social media feeds, and food delivered to our door in minutes, are we all in some way becoming addicts? To really get a handle of this, we need to talk about the world we're living in, because the core of the problem is a massive mismatch. We're walking around with brains that are basically running on ancient Stone Age software, but we're living in a futuristic world of more that's bombarding us with stimuli our brains just weren't built to handle. See, for most of human history, things that felt good, like sugar, excitement, or information, were rare and hard to come by. Our brains evolved to chase those things relentlessly. But today, we have a fire hose of potent, high-reward stuff aimed right at us 24/7. It's not just powerful drugs. It's the super-caffeinated, super-sweetened, hyper-clickable, gamified world that's always in our pocket. And this isn't just some abstract theory. I mean, look at this. This is the real-life timeline of one of Dr. Lembke's patients, a young man named Max. You can see how, in just a little over a decade, he went through 14 different substances, each one more potent than the last. This is a terrifying but classic example of a brain that's been thrown completely out of whack, constantly seeking a bigger and bigger hit. So the big question is, why? Why does our brain do this? How does something that feels good turn into this relentless, painful trap? Well, to explain the science behind it, Dr. Lembke uses this really simple but brilliant metaphor: a seesaw. All right, so picture a seesaw in the middle of your brain. On one side, you've got pleasure. On the other, you've got pain. When you do something that feels good, say, eat a delicious piece of cake, the seesaw tips down on the pleasure side. But here's the thing. Your brain's number one job is to keep things level. It loves balance, a state called homeostasis. So to level the seesaw, it pushes down on the pain side. Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, and this is the part you really need to understand. That first time you have the cake, you get a huge tip toward pleasure and just a tiny, brief little come down afterward. But if you keep hitting that pleasure lever over and over, your brain gets smart. It starts to anticipate it. It actually starts leaning on the pain side just to be ready. The result? The pleasure hit gets weaker and shorter, while the come down, that feeling of craving, anxiety, and pain, gets way stronger and lasts a lot longer. And eventually, this leads to something really crucial: a dopamine deficit state. You've basically been leaning on the pleasure side so hard for so long that your seesaw is now permanently tilted toward pain. At this point, you're not even using your drug of choice to feel good anymore. You're just using it to try and get back to level, to just feel normal for a little while. That's the core of addiction. So, this sounds pretty hopeless, right? I mean, if slamming the pleasure button over and over again is guaranteed to make us miserable in the long run, what are we supposed to do? What's the alternative? Well, this is where things get really fascinating, because the answer is completely counterintuitive. The key to getting your seesaw back in balance isn't to find more sources of easy pleasure. It's to do the exact opposite, to intentionally and carefully press on the pain side. Now, there's a fancy scientific name for this, hormesis, but the idea is super simple. It's basically the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger principle, but applied to your brain chemistry. When you give yourself a dose of something that's a little bit painful or stressful, your brain doesn't just return to baseline afterward, it overcompensates, releasing its own feel-good chemicals, like dopamine, which gives you a nice, gentle, and much more lasting tip back toward the pleasure side. And look, we're not talking about anything crazy here. We're talking about stuff you've probably heard of, maybe even do already. Things like a really tough workout, or plunging into an ice-cold shower, or intermittent fasting. Even something as simple as putting your phone away and forcing yourself to just be bored for a while. These are all ways to press on the pain side so your body can create its own, healthier pleasure response. And what's wild is that this isn't some new age biohack. This is ancient wisdom. The ancient Greeks were all over this. Socrates basically said pleasure and pain are two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. By understanding that, we can start to work with our biology instead of against it. Okay, so that's the science. But how do we actually use this stuff in our real, messy, everyday lives? Let's talk about a couple of practical strategies from the toolkit for getting your balance back. First up is a strategy called self-binding. The idea here is simple. Stop trying to rely on willpower alone. Think of it like a muscle. It gets exhausted. So instead, you create actual physical barriers between you and your temptation. This could be using an app that locks you out of social media after 9 p.m., or it could be like one patient who literally had his wife lock all the alcohol in the house in a cabinet that only she had the key to. You're creating friction to slow down that impulse. And we really need to get a handle on this stuff because listen to this number, 70%. The World Health Organization says that 70% of deaths around the globe are caused by things we can actually change, modifiable behaviors like smoking, what we eat, and how much we move. Our compulsions are, quite literally, killing us. So if our own habits are the biggest threat to our lives, what's the single most powerful tool we have to fight back? It's not another productivity app, it's not a new diet, it's something much more human. It's radical honesty. See, the thing about these compulsive behaviors is they love the dark. They thrive on secrets and shame and isolation. The single best way to break that cycle is to bring it into the light, to tell the truth, first to yourself and then to another person you trust. It sounds simple, but it replaces that toxic shame with connection and accountability. And to show you how powerful this is, even in small ways, Dr. Lembke tells this very human story about herself. She secretly ate all her kids' Easter bunny chocolates and then lied about it. For 3 days, she was consumed by shame. Finally, she realized, how can I teach my kids to be honest if I'm not? Telling them the truth was incredibly humbling, but it reconnected her to her family and her own values. And when you combine these tools, self-binding to create space and honesty to break the shame, the results can be incredible. Remember that patient Jacob whose life was being destroyed by a pornography compulsion? By using these very strategies, he was able to become, in his own words, free of his obsession. He reconnected with his wife and got his life back. All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the big ideas to take away from this? 1, our brains are just not built for this modern world of easy dopamine. 2, that pleasure-pain seesaw means every high has a price, and that price goes up over time. 3, the surprising secret to getting back in balance is to embrace healthy discomfort. And 4, we have real, practical tools like self-binding and radical honesty to help us regain control. So that leaves us with one last question, a question for you to take with you. We're all swimming in this same ocean of dopamine. We all have our own romance novels or chocolate bunnies or infinite scrolls. The real challenge for every single one of us is to decide, how are you going to choose to find your balance?